Welcome to the Felt Dyslexic Artist Interview. My name is Liz Buckridge. For me, as a dyslexic artist, other artists and creatives have always been my number one inspiration. In these interviews, we talk with artists and creatives who share their stories and we gain insight into their process from inspiration to art tips, career building, and more. We're so lucky to listen to the wisdom of Rebecca Kelly today. I'm so excited to hear about her past and future projects and insights on life as an artist. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi,
Thank you for talking with us today.
happy to. So
Yay.
honored to be asked.
Yay.
Mhm.
So I'm going to jump right in. Describe the art you make. What mediums do you primarily work in, and why do you choose those mediums?
Um, let's see, primarily 100% textiles. I just love textiles. I love old textiles. A lot of my work begins with a found object or scrap or something that I'm going to repurpose.
That's cool. Do you work in any other mediums?
I do. I've dabbled in, paper making, collage, and a little bit of ceramics.
How did you get into making art?
I think I was just born a creative and a person who loved to do things. I feel very lucky to have maybe grown up before the internet and before widespread, access to cable television all the time, because I definitely had that childhood where you'll find some things, make some things. And, my mom is very much, has a very artistic sensibility and really encouraged crafting and coloring and all those things. So that was my gateway.
Can you tell us about your background, how you first became interested in art? Do you remember being little,
I,
making anything?
I do 100%. Yeah, just, coloring books were like my best friends. Construction paper, we definitely had some fun as a kid. Just my mom having us make little Christmas ornaments, even before I went to school. So like I really remember being a toddler and, making things. I had an older brother, so I was always just maybe tagging along and crafting. So way back in my earliest memories are of making things.
So cool. How did you get into your specific style?
Yeah, I think I've sort of had a kind of usurp this route, if that's the word. And I think I've sort of shied away from even identifying as an artist. So I'm so honored to be asked. I always loved to make things, but then as I sort of continued in my academic career, I got pulled in a lot of different directions and really got focused in art history and then art conservation. And so I've worked for a long time as a textile conservator, and I would feel that some of my creative pursuits got a little bit sidelined. So it's been a really wonderful few years where I've really carved out time and have tried to get back to using my hand skills in a creative way rather than just the technical way as a conservator.
What themes or subjects inspire your work?
Definitely women's history. I always look to the past. This idea of a sense of home is something that has been really integral to my work right now. I love to experiment in my creative work with this idea of like magical realism, which maybe comes kind of more from literature, but I sort of always love these things that seem almost real, but then there'll be these little kind of unexpected and kind of magical elements to it. I've sort of experimented with doll making and some of this other stuff too that I think allows me to explore some of those themes.
Cool. Um, this might be a little bit of a weird question for you. I'm not sure. Do you consider yourself neurodivergent or neurotypical?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, and I've spent a lot of my later half of my career being a teacher and an instructor. So, yeah, it's something I think about a lot in different styles of learning. I think everybody is actually divergent, is somewhat of my experience. But I don't know. I would say that for most of my childhood, I would have been classified as typical. I was a rule follower. I was a really good student, so I sort of like maybe excelled in that way. But yeah, I don't know. That is a really a challenging question for sure.
Have you, talking about challenges, have you faced any challenges or setbacks in your art career and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think so. I think really starting to experiment with studio art as an adult and kind of transferring into, an academic setting. And I was supposed to be a dual major in studio art and art history. And then I just sort of like took this detour. I think I just was very shy and not really self expressed enough as a young person to articulate what I was trying to do creatively. So I got a little scared and sort of ran from the studio art world, into the safety for me of things that I felt I was really good at reading, writing papers, being a really good student. And I went down the art history track, which I don't regret at all. It was kind of amazing. And I think I was also kind of leaning towards, oh, maybe being a career artist is too challenging and too difficult. So I sort of thought maybe the museum track was sort of an avenue to use my passions in a way that, maybe had a more particular career trajectory.
I think that's smart. Um, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, the very northern tip of Aquidneck Island here. And I just loved it. I really consider myself a child of the Sakonnet River. I grew up right along there. And I really think of that little beach, strip of beach in Portsmouth, between Portsmouth and Tiverton, as my first studio. And where I really sort of began my idea of loving to collect things. I think some of my first collections were natural history specimens, shells and sticks, and all of those types of things. So, yeah, so I really grew up in a very special place, and I reflect on that a lot.
I love that. Um, do you have a favorite colorway for your art? And is the colorway for your art different or the same as the colors in your house?
That's a great question. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is natural dyes. So I do have a very specific color palette that I'm very attracted to. And it's one that's derived from the natural world. And I incorporate a lot of naturally dyed textiles into my work. And I very much consider myself a colorist. I love color. I share a living space with someone else, so there's lots of things to negotiate. But I feel like lots of my own colorways kind of make their way into my world for sure. I love things that look a bit old, a bit distressed. I love old quilts. I love faded tablecloths. So yeah, I love this sort of dusty, kind of historic looking palette.
I love that. Describe the space where you make your art. Where are we?
So we're in my home studio. And yeah, I think it's really reflective of who I am. I think there's all sorts of bits and pieces of things that I've inherited, things that have come my way. As a very young person, in high school, my mom and I would, go to various antique shops and thrift shops. So I have bits and bobs around this studio that have maybe been with me for, over 30 years now. So yeah, so I just love combining all of these old elements into something new.
Yay. Um, how did your school system support your interest in art growing up?
Yeah, I think I was really lucky. I think that I went to the public school system in Portsmouth, and I do remember the names of all of my art teachers from kindergarten through high school. And in particular, when I transitioned from elementary school to middle school, which is always like kind of a milestone in many kids' lives and kind of a challenging one, and it was for me. But art became my space definitely, as a 10, 11-year-old person. I joined an after school art club that we used to kind of do um, projects. And I remember one of my first pieces of art that I was so proud of was a pastel that I made in that after school art club, and it became part of a slideshow that was a backdrop for a Christmas concert that that our band was doing. And I think that that moment too was the first time that I started to get introduced to art supplies and medium, like sort of beyond crayons and markers. And I was like, wow, there's like a whole world of materials. I very much am a person that's interested in, the material aspects of things, materiality. So, I do like experimenting with different mediums and all different ways of creating color and texture.
I love that. How do you see your work evolving or changing in the future? What do you have planned?
Yeah, I think maybe to work a bit larger scale. I think I do love miniature things, so I think my artwork kind of is operating on this very tiny scale. Quilts, mini quilts, dolls, embroidered books or things I've been working a lot on, and kind of maybe trying to take some of these themes and put them into um, a larger way of sharing my ideas. Is kind of what I'm thinking.
That's cool. Is making art an emotional process for you or strategic?
100% emotional. Definitely comes from, I don't plan things out too much. I just try to be really experimental in my own practice. And I think that maybe comes from having to be so strategic as a conservator that now when I'm in my own studio, I really want to be very experimental.
Of that. Can you walk us through your creative process from idea to finished piece?
Yeah, I think I really go first towards materials and colors, and I just kind of start gathering things together of what I might want to make. And I've also been very grateful to discover a couple of other artisans who work with textile medium. And I was always kind of keeping a separate sketchbook where I would draw and sketch out ideas. And now I've started keeping a fiber sketchbook, and I actually just do my sort of planning with collaging and sort of immediately working within the medium of, applique or embroidery. So that's been kind of a recent, maybe like year-long change that has really come to my work that I'm excited about.
Wow. How do you combine the art you love to make and the art you sell?
So that's interesting for me. I really haven't sold any art. Maybe a few really minor things here and there. But that's something that I'm working towards. And I've also had a recent kind of change in my career path. I've about a year ago accepted a position as an executive director and curator of the South County Museum in Narragansett, Rhode Island. And we have an associated school of craft, along with the museum. Just kind of like a dream come true to be like in this history, material culture world. And then, using the history and using craft of the past to inspire contemporary artists, designers. So we're really building our community there. I've been teaching a lot of natural dyeing there and working towards having a space where I'll be selling some of the things that I'm making, naturally dyed textiles and quilts. So that's definitely kind of future facing goal for me, and helping other people to kind of get into that environment as well.
Has it been easy for you to transition?
It's been tricky. Yeah, it's really just sort of facing all of our, self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all these things that I think many of us kind of struggle with, to just kind of get over some of these hurdles and, really start putting my art out there into the world is exciting.
So, how do you have a website?
I don't have a personal website. I do not. So that's something also I've been thinking about.
Okay. Well, how do people find you?
You can find me at South County Museum. So just www.southcountymuseum.com or Rebecca at southcountymuseum.org would be great.
Awesome. We'll put that information in the show notes. Can you share a recent project or a piece of work that you're particularly happy about?
Yeah, I think I have a couple of fun things behind me here. Some of my dolls and some of my recent kind of color studies. We're working on a big community quilt project actually at the museum that's coming out really well. I dyed over, 55 colors this summer in colors. And yeah, we're going to be putting that quilt together this winter, and it's starting to come together in a really beautiful way.
How do you stay motivated as an artist?
Um, that's that's a great question too. I don't know. I think I'm just so passionate. I'm so curious. A lot of times when I meet young people, it's just like always be curious. So I'm just always seeking inspiration. I'm very inspired by the natural world around me. I'm an avid museum goer, so I'm always just kind of, I think, out in the world. But going to museums and talking with other artists is hugely important for me.
Are there any artists or creatives who have influenced or inspired your work?
So many. I just think women artists, like across time and space, have just been so hugely influential to me. And I think, especially women of the 18th and 19th century, I'm hugely inspired by the arts and crafts movement, May Morris, women associated with the Glasgow School in Scotland in the early 20th century, who were embroiderers, are kind of the people that I lean on or look back to quite often.
Oh, I can't wait to look them up. Is there any advice that you would give an aspiring artist looking to pursue a career in the arts?
Yeah, I would say just never give up. Take everybody's advice under advisement, but maybe follow your heart. I think I sometimes got a little bit pulled away from, things that I was very passionate about or grounded or believed in. There's so much economic pressure, and everybody has advice about, oh, this isn't a lucrative career path, or you should do this instead. And it's really tricky. And as an educator and a professor, I try to help people navigate, being bombarded with advice. So I always just say, kind of block out the noise a little bit, go into a quiet space and reflect. I think it's really important to listen to yourself.
I agree. So, what is your favorite book, movie, song, podcast?
Do you want one of each?
Whatever you want to give me.
Okay, so I am a huge avid reader and have been as a child. So, so many books have influenced me throughout time. I think the first really influential book I ever read was The Secret Garden. I love anything now by Alice Hoffman. I think Blackbird House, is probably a book that I read last year that's still kind of floating around in my brain. And again, I love books or movies that sort of aspects of sort of magical realism. So Amelie is kind of like one of my all-time favorite films. I also loved the book House of Spirits. Yeah, so those are some things for sure, very inspirational. And I think one of my favorite podcasts is one called Haptic and Hue. It's by a UK-based weaver named Joe Andrews. And I started listening to that podcast a few years ago, and it was great to see her bringing her craft together with history. And it was very inspirational to kind of kicking me more into the direction that I have been of being like, okay, you can be a historian, you can be a textile conservator, curator, but you can be an artist and maker as well. So those were some
Yay.
things. Yeah.
Is there a book, movie, song, or podcast that you recommend over and over again that's different than your favorites?
Um, let's see. Gosh, I definitely recommend Haptic and Hue to a lot of my students. I think it's a great gateway to, just learning about textile history in a really fun and kind of engaging way. I also love the podcast Dressed, which is sort of a fashion history podcast. And I also love the podcast Ologies. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Um, what do you want to talk about that I didn't ask?
Oh gosh, I don't know. You asked great questions, Liz. I think we covered a lot. Yeah.
Yay, I did my job.
Yeah, you did.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for letting us into your studio today. I felt inspired for sure. I always feel inspired when I'm around you. And much love, and we'll see you next time. Yay.